Right, that's it. We are live. So it's been a while since we've had one of these chats, but now we're just going to kind of get back into hopefully a few more of these, a bit more regularly again, hopefully in a run up to a new season, whenever that might be. But we thought we'd touch on something a little more serious with this one, and that's on racism in non-league. Obviously, racism has been in the news massively over the last couple of weeks or so, obviously, since the terrible sort of situation and killing of George Floyd in the States, and then all the protests and things that are happening here. So just kind of thought, we could touch on racism in non-league football. Obviously, you see that racism in football, especially at the top level, gets a huge amount of coverage and a lot of high-profile coverage. But does it get covered as much in non-league football? So, by way of introductions, I'll just go around. So we've got Chris Waters, assistant manager. Adam Murray, centre half, stroke centre forward. You choose. Spyros Mentis, centre midfield. Dan Brathwaite, centre back, and Eddie on right back, or sometimes centre mid as well. So thanks for joining us, guys. Just want this really to be, as I say, a bit of a chat and a kind of discussion really about your experiences in non-league football and football in general. So Adam, do you mind if I start with you?
No, not really, mate. I don't mind.
So really, kind of if you want to sort of touch on, the kind of stuff that you've experienced perhaps in non-league or just in football and growing up.
It's really mainly when I was younger, really, like when I was more littler, more skinnier. Just more like people call you the N-word in football. I've had that maybe 4 or 5 times, maybe when I was, maybe 15, around that time, just to get in your head, and I found it disgusting. The ref don't really, didn't really do a lot. You know what I mean? He didn't hear it, and I think that just makes me personally really frustrated, because it's kind of your word against theirs. If they're saying no, you're saying yeah. It's makes you angry, makes you upset. And many times I've been sent off through that as well, taking anger out on the guy and tackling him very aggressively, maybe so.
Reacting to the abuse.
Yeah, like a chance I could take him out as such. I take him out, but you get punished for that because they've not dealt with the situation beforehand. But I've had people come at me for my father. His background. I don't know. It's like you black man, you're this, you're that, and that's kind of like you're only here because of your dad and all this. Kind of, that was hard to take, because when you don't, I suppose when you don't really know the background of your father as much, because he's never been there, that kind of hit home as well. But mainly, really, growing up in the older age in football, that I've not really had it a lot, to be fair. So other than non-really situations when I was younger, I didn't really have much racism other than them occurrences, really.
Right, and Dan, what about you? Any views on like your experiences?
Yeah, I had a bit. I only remember one incident when I was young. I was probably maybe 10 or 11. Sunday game. I don't remember what the guy was. It was a supporter from the other team. I don't remember what he said. I just remember my dad at the time just having him up against a tree, and there being a big commotion. And that was all I remember about it. I don't remember if it affected me or what, but it was a long time ago. But other than that, I don't think there's ever been anything as I was growing up. But then in non-league, there's two incidents that stand out. I was playing for the same club. I'm not going to divulge the club it was, but the first one was player on player, and it was within the same team. Yeah, a white lad called a black lad. He wouldn't pass him the ball, and he called him a black CUNT. He got sent off, but the black lad first of all walked off. He was just like his head just exploded. Went for him, walked off, went to walk off the pitch, but then he came back. He got booked. I don't know why. Maybe for going for the other lad, and then the other lad got sent off, and then didn't see him again. So
was that like a club decision then that he wasn't coming back, or was he just not facing up? Or
I just think, well, I think first off it was him just I'm not going to show my face again. But then the club kind of played we'll sack him anyway. So yeah, and then the other incident was same club as I say. It was a fan, and I'm assuming it was my own team's fan. I've never seen him before, never seen him again. To an opposition player, a lad had gone down injured, and he said to him, "Get up and go back to the jungle." And I looked and I was like, "What the? What?" And I say, like, at the time, I was relatively young, believe it or not, and maybe I should have approached him and called him out on it. I didn't. I should have, but yeah, it was like heat of the moment. I was just like, did I hear that right? What's going on?
Did anyone call him out on it?
No, I don't really. There weren't too many people around it, but if I heard it and I was maybe 30, 40 yards away, other people would have heard it. So, yeah, it's frustrated that I didn't, but as I say, I never saw him again. And that doesn't make it right, but I didn't confront it, which I should have done. So, but I think, thankfully, I think they're the only incidents that I've come across. But luckily, I've never it myself. Luckily.
And Ed, what about yourself?
Just sort of thinking back on it then, there's been a couple of incidences that are kind of stick in my memory, and one was quite early on in my career. It wasn't actually directed at me, but somebody threw a banana on the pitch, and it was while one of the lads was taking a throw in, and it just kind of, that was the first time I'd seen it. You know, you'd heard about bits on the TV, and you see it in the high profile games and stuff. That was the first time I'd seen it sort of right up in the flesh. The lad acted really well with it. He actually opened the banana, took a bite, and threw it back, which I thought was pretty good. But he kept his cool. But it's poor that that happens in these days. And then there was another one only 2 years ago, and these guys will probably remember it. We won't go into where we were, but we had an away game on a Tuesday night, and everybody was struggling to get there. It was late. We got there really late. It was middle of nowhere, and we went out on the pitch, and we didn't have the best of games. And it was during the second half. I just started getting called the N-word, and I remember taking a throw in, and there was 2 or 3 guys just repeatedly saying it. And I kind of just shrugged it off and thought, you know what, I'm not gonna raise to it. But it wasn't until sort of got in the car afterwards, and you boys will know my mum's like #1 fan. And I was driving back with her on the way home, and she turned around to me and she was like, are you all right? And we started to have she was really worried that it was gonna get to me. She was like, did you hear what they were calling you and that? And I was like, yeah. I did. And she was like, are you sure you're all right? So it happens at both ends of the game. I think right from the top and all the way down to non-league. Problem is in non-league, it's a little bit more difficult because it's not publicised as much. There's not enough cameras, and I think also you've also got the difficulty of, yes, individual clubs will want to ban fans, but it's difficult if you do it on a mass scale because, at the end of the day, people need, clubs need, they need gate receipts.
Yeah, I understand that, but yeah, I mean, that's not there's got to be something worth more than the money, though. But I understand what you're saying. Spyros, what about you? You had any experience of like abuse and that from the sidelines?
I've had it in England once in a game against Bedford, I think it was. I can't remember what the lad said, but he said something towards like "get me a chicken kebab after the game" or something like that. And it didn't. To be fair, it didn't affect me much because I've dealt with racism throughout my life. Because I'm an Albanian, I was raised in Greece, and things are bad out here in terms of for those that are Albanians, and I've dealt with it throughout my whole life. Not just me, but my whole family as well. So there's people that ended up fighting over it over here, and there are other families that just ended up, just saying here's what it is and dealing with it. And that's what happened. And when it happened at that game, it just didn't affect me at all. But Dobbo, don't know if you remember him, the striker Reece Dobson, he went nuts and he started going after the ref and whatnot. And the ref reported it to the FA. And then there was a case that took so long. It took about 6 months. And they kept asking me so many questions. In the end, I was just like, you know what? I don't care. I just wanted to give it to Dobbo and let him deal with it because I just learned to not let it affect me, to be honest with you, from a young age. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but that's just the way I've dealt with it for my whole life. And I've dealt, from listening to the other guys, it's just surprising how much more you deal with it, even not just from your skin color, but from where you come from in some countries as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting that, I mean, Chris, I'll come on to you in a minute, but I mean, it's interesting that all of you have said, you've just learned to deal with it, and that's it's terrible that it's become a kind of norm, not a norm, but it's something that's not unexpected, and it's just something that's just kind of built up over the years, and you've developed tactics for dealing with it. I mean, that's never going to kind of clear it up, though, is it? Really?
Yeah.
And Chris, what about you from sort of sideline, dressing room, coaching kind of experience? Have you seen any? Had to deal with any, or?
Yeah, I think if you just look at the whole subject on a whole. You've come to me last for a reason, right, Neil, haven't you? Because effectively, I'm not going to have suffered anything, and I think that's the massive issue. And I was saying it. So I had a couple of chats with Braths, but I was saying it to somebody the other day. Like, I don't get how people. I don't get, like, me personally. I don't get how this is even a talking point. I don't get how it's an issue. I don't get how the other four lads are different to me because they got different skin tone to what I had, and just none of it makes sense. I think so. When I was thinking back, I think the Spyros Shaw one come to mind when I was thinking of it. I think the biggest one of, and probably the main eye opener I've ever had was, it weren't on a football pitch. It was, so when we were at Boreham Wood, like, we used to have famous end of season dues over to Marbella. It was sort of all paid for. We got to the passport control, the far side, and I had 3 lads in front of me. They're all black lads. When I tell you that they were at the passport checkout for a good 6 minutes, 7 minutes each, like, waiting, and then I had to go through. I got to it thinking the same thing, and he didn't even look at my passport. He just waved me straight through, and it was like wow. So it's more the systemic stuff that is the issue that is going to be the tougher nut to crack. And even when we were out there, so I shared with a lad called Marvin and a lad called Liam, both black lads. We then had a room in the middle, which was 4 white young lads. And then the room next to it was 2 black lads and another white lad. We were there for 3 nights. 2 of the nights, we got kicked out of our hotel and had to beg to go back in for noise that the young lads had been making. On 2 of the occasions, we weren't even in the hotel. It was because 2 of my roommates were black. So that's probably the worst and most eye-opening case I've had of it. Obviously, we unfortunately had one at Garden Walk last year, which I think was dealt with well. But it's not something I've had to deal with, Neil. Do you know what I mean? Yes, you call it out, and yes, you do deal with it. And no, you don't accept it when you see it, and I don't. But it's not something you and I sitting here could never really understand.
No,
you know what I mean? What the situation is, and I think that's probably been the eye opener of all of it. Is just that can't walk in other people's shoes, you know?
No, yeah, I understand. Yeah. Just sort of like going back to like on pitch matters first of all. Muzzo, I think you said you spoke to a referee, and Spyros, you mentioned Dobbo sort of trying to get a ref involved. Is that the process? Is that what your first port of call is to a ref? I mean, is that what you're told to do?
He's managing the game, isn't he? So that's where you go to.
Yeah.
He's the one who deals with the game. He's on the whistle. But that, when I was younger, that's what I thought was the best option to do. Go to the ref, tell him what's happened. He's going against mine. But then, like everyone really said, he's kind of learn to just kind of deal with it and let it go on, kind of thing. But really, we shouldn't really. We should be standing up for ourselves and making a big issue of it. But then, like Spyros has highlighted, you make a big issue, and then what? 6, 7, 8 months down the line, you still don't hear nothing, and it's you know, it's not a quick process, is it? But then you feel like it's forgotten about.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Is that the process then? So you report it to the ref. I assume he then has to include it in his report. And then what? Does anything come of it? I mean, you know, do you ever hear back? Or
it goes to the FA. It got with my case. It went to the FA, and the FA got back to me after some time. But it seemed like I had to prove it rather than just saying what happened and having the backing of a referee. But at the same time, if he says that he hasn't heard it, then he hasn't heard it. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that, is there? It's like if he hasn't seen a foul, he can't give it if he hasn't seen it.
That's the problem, isn't it? It's because if nobody else hears it, then it's just one person's word against another. And then if you think about it in the court of law, it's a he said, she said. How is anybody going to prove it? And I'm not saying your case specifically. I'm just saying cases in general. But it doesn't surprise me when you say it took the FA 6 months, because it's not high profile enough for them to speed it any quicker.
Yeah.
And you think that's because it's a non-league thing, Dan, or because, I mean, if it was Raheem Sterling, or if it was, you know, I mean, did those cases get seen and heard a lot quicker because it's high profile in the press, damaging the Premier League brand?
100.
I'm not sure the timelines for them ones, so I'm not going to comment on the timelines. But if you compare the two, then there was a lot more evidence to be gathered from the Premier League ones in terms of eyewitnesses, sound, TV cameras, all of that stuff. So that would have obviously taken time, and lip readers and all that stuff that they used in some of the cases. So, but it's similar to, you know, bringing football back in the pandemic and the Premier League, which is the money league, and that's the one that everybody wants, and that's the one they need because of the broadcast and all that. They're going to deal with the big issues at the end of the game first, because that's where the money is, rightly or wrongly. And the case that we had last season, I don't know the timelines of it. I only got involved after the FA's decision came back, but put it this way, the bodies involved aren't joined up at all.
Right.
And it's just ridiculous. You've got the FA, you've got the local leagues, and then you've got Kick It Out, and there's just no cohesion at all. They don't talk to each other. You've got one body saying one thing, you've got the other body saying another thing. And it's just, why is it so difficult? Racism is racism no matter what league it's in.
Yeah.
And so if something's happened, then let's deal with it. And I'm not saying, it should have been banned or whatever, because I don't necessarily think that banning people for infinite amount of time is necessarily the way to solve it, because there's a massive amount of education that needs to happen across the board in society, because it's not a football problem, it's a society problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And until it gets solved in society, it's not going to get solved anywhere else. But football can do more, the FA can do more, and then all of the other bodies. As I say, it's just they don't talk to each other anywhere near enough. And it's so frustrating. So frustrating.
So
I think
that was. Oh, go on.
No, I was going to say, well, it's what Will Smith has been sort of posted everywhere, really, isn't it? It's not getting worse; it's getting filmed, and I think that's effectively why it's worse, because of the evidence side of things. There's no point. There's no point sitting and denying that there isn't an issue, and as you're right, it's a society problem, not a football problem. But when it's he said, she said, you've not really got a leg to stand on with things, and I don't know how you change that, or if you ever can. But until we had one, was it with the Boreham Wood game, where there was just a player and whoever that fella was. No one knows. It was just them two that were there, so no one knows whether he did or he didn't. Like if the fella's walked away and he has said it and he's got away with it, then he's buzzing. And if he has said it and the fella's walking across the pitch having to deal with the fact that he knows he's got no proof, then it's like he's hard up. Do you know what I mean? So it's I don't know how you get around that one. You'd like to think that no one's ever lying when it comes to them kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on there on like more people, there being more evidence and filming, because I was going to sort of like say, obviously, the Kick It Out, their stats and their report showed that it had been on the increase. But whether that's just an increase in reporting, because the kind of channels now to report this kind of stuff is there more, I don't know, or as you say, it's being filmed and people are able to recognize it, and kind of film it and shame and that kind of thing. So do you think it's as prevalent in football as it's always been?
That's a hard one. It's like you're saying. Go on.
No, I was going to say, I think the majority of the cases I've seen and heard have been from when I was younger. I think that, I don't know, the boys, I think Braths and Ed maybe might be able to answer this one. Older lads. Racial banter was quite a big thing in dressing rooms maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was strangely, it was part of group cohesion. And that seems to have brightly died out. I remember being at Cheshunt and we had a large amount of black lads, and walking into the dressing room, I remember having my first shower and there was a Greek lad, two black lads and a white lad, and they're all battering each other. And it's just like, quiet little lad, me at that time, only 18, but it's just straight away. My first training session, you get used to that being accepted and that being okay. And that side of things definitely died out. I see it less. Maybe that's because I don't play and I'm not in the circle. So the boys might sort of say that differently. But that's, the racial banter within changing rooms was a big part of changing rooms at one point.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think I wouldn't say it's died out. I think it's not as sort of prevalent as it used to be. But 100%, 10 years ago, I remember when sort of coming through YT and, early pro, in the dressing room, it was every day, all day, every day. From the minute you walked in the changing rooms, there was, racial banter, both sides, all sides, going on. I don't think it's as much, but it definitely still happens. And it's not, and it's not that they don't like each other. It's not that they, some of them are great friends. It's just, it's, as you said, Chris, at the beginning, right? It's something that they identify straight away. It's the first thing that they can see. It's the first thing that they can comment on, right? If you look at somebody, it's the skin color. So it's kind of just one of those things that they just use to start with. It's the first comment when it comes to a banter or if they're backed into a corner. Who knows?
But you was almost made to feel like it was okay. Do you know what I mean? Like within that dressing room, in that situation, I was a minority, and I used to get it. But you was made to feel like it was all right, because you were friends or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And it's like a distorted view of like real world.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got clear memories. I've probably got, still probably got 50 odd, photos on the phone from group chats and bits and pieces that, you look back, if I go back through my phone and I'll probably go, Jesus Christ, like you shouldn't, that shouldn't be acceptable. But that was just, like you say, it was socially acceptable then. I used to go in the change room and come in after training, and one of the white lads would be handing out bananas to the black lads. And it just used to be okay, and used to be like, yeah, you want one of them, didn't you, Ed? And and like you say, it just was okay, but and that was only 5 years ago.
I mean, that's the thing you say. It seems so recent. You're talking about 5-10 years ago. That's no time at all. Wow. But you're saying from a dressing room, it's that there is perhaps still some of that now, but it's less, or.
I don't know. I can't really answer anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's less, but I think it definitely is still there. It's still there at some clubs, and it's definitely still there. I think definitely at some sort of levels in the pro game.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Yeah, it's not like it used to be, but there are levels of it, and that's not just one way at all. Yeah,
but there's like very fixed stereotypes within football, isn't there, around black lads, and I don't. Yeah, again, probably where I come away from it, I don't know whether it's as prevalent anymore because I'm not involved in that side of the humour and stuff. But yeah, the whole I see it on Twitter earlier about black goalkeepers, and that's like a thing, like an actual thing, and it's. You think about it, it's madness, but it's like an actual thing, and yeah, I don't actually know where I was going with that point. To be fair, Neil, but
I think you're right. I mean, there is kind of long-seated sort of stereotypes around players and around black players. That probably in some people's minds are. That they will say there's some truth in it, like you say about the black goalkeepers. I mean, I'm older than all of you, and I remember those kind of comments being made, about clubs signing, pro clubs signing black goalkeepers, and sort of there was always the question around what would happen when it got cold and stuff, and it was crazy. It was crazy when you think about it, but so I think those kind of stereotypes, and possibly from people who are in the game in dressing rooms, who have been in dressing rooms a long time, might be described as old school. How you've got to try and shake those stereotypes away.
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, but it's down to education, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. I think that's the point. It's got coming from the top, isn't it? And I think when people sit here and say, "Oh, there needs to be more BAME representation," I don't necessarily agree with that necessarily, because you got to earn the right to be there in one respect. In the other respect, you've got to be given the chance to get there. But just because, to me personally, I'm speaking from a personal point of view, just because somebody's in a position of power and they've got the same skin colour as me, doesn't mean that I'm going to respect them more than somebody that hasn't necessarily, and vice versa. So it's a bit of a shady phrase, that whole there needs to be more BAME people in senior positions and that, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the respect that you think you are, or that you need. So it's a bit of a touchy one, that one, in my opinion. But there needs to be an education right from the top, and it needs to filter all the way through.
Because I know there's been John Barnes on Twitter this week has been quite vocal regarding black managers and the chances he's had. But I mean, I think non-league there definitely seems to be. I would say, from what I've seen, people at Garden Walk of visiting teams, there seems to be a probably a larger proportion of black managers in non-league than perhaps in the top leagues. Would you say, Chris? Or
you cut out, mate? I didn't hear the last.
Sorry, just saying about there just seems to be, from what I've seen down at Garden Walk with visiting managers and stuff, there seems to be perhaps a greater proportion of black managers in non-league than perhaps in the pro game and the top leagues.
Trying to think. Yeah, there is actually. There is, and I don't know what stops that from happening at the top level. I think Brathwaite is right. It's on merit, but whether that's, I don't know why all of a sudden. I see again something on Twitter about the main sporting bodies, and right at the top level across all the sports, and the number of black people that sit on that board. And yeah, I wouldn't have an answer as to why that is. Whether that's systemic, whether that's just coincidental, like who knows? But yeah, I think there are certainly more. I wouldn't say that's sort of more so now. I think I remember playing. My first manager was black. My first manager was Troy Townsend, who is obviously the head of Kick It Out. So I've always known him, and the other lad that springs to mind is a guy called Steve Brown. So I've always known black managers. But as to why they don't get opportunities further up the ladder, I think Brathwaite is right. Whether it's on abilities or whether it's just faces don't fit, who can actually answer those questions? Unfortunately.
Yeah, because unfortunately, no one's ever going to come out and say that is the reason that someone hasn't given them a job. No,
and I see a job advertised last year. And it was even going for it. It was looking at it. It was in coaching with England and stuff, but you had to be within the BAME category, and it's sort of like okay, but even you're still putting restrictions on things based on skin color, So now all of a sudden I can't go for that job, and it's like that doesn't makes sense, and probably taking me back to the first point I said, like, I just don't get how you can have an opinion on someone purely because of a tone of a skin. Like, I think I mentioned it earlier, if you're a dick, you're a dick. If you're cool, you're cool. Like, but people aren't educated in a similar way, are they? And I think that's the hard part. And again, what we're brought up with in this country, you think back to history, you don't learn about Black history.
No.
Not that I don't know if any of you ever paid attention to history anyway, but you don't. They're not things you cover. Do you know what I mean? So you are brought up naive. You are born naive to slavery. The only things that I've ever really known about that is through the films you watch, and that's horrendous, really.
At school, I was learning about World War II and One, not about like Rosa Parks and slavery and stuff like that. Don't hear of it, do you?
No, but surely they're as important as each other. Do you know what I mean? In different ways, they've both guided where we are today, and yeah.
I mean, I my daughter now, she's 12. She's been doing civil rights at school, so that hopefully the curriculum is changing, and that kind of the civil rights movement is getting taught in her school. So hopefully there's that's a nationwide thing, and I recognise it's only like the first step and part of it, but I mean I think that's definitely got to be the way forward, a kind of a world history rather than as Muzza says, World War I, World War II if you're in the UK, because and so is there anything football can do for that education?
I'd like to answer that one.
Go on.
I think it's important on how going back to that banter. I think it's how people react to situations, and especially the big characters in big change rooms. I think if they react in a certain way where it's not acceptable, even at the banter sort of level, then I think it will be reduced massively in the group chat and in the change room. But it's a movement where it can't just happen in one change room. It has to happen as a whole, and that's really hard to do.
I think it's hard though when you've got a big character in the change room. Like we've had a couple like the big characters, funny guys, you accept them who they are, and they drop like little bits in there, like here and there, and you accept it, and you think, oh right, yeah, he's a good lad, he's only bantering all that, and then it slowly gets like a little bit worse, but you still accept who they are because they don't mean it, but it's still there.
But then you say you might accept it, but if someone else comes into the dressing room, a new player finds that totally, whatever they're saying, totally out of order and doesn't accept it. So you say you kind of in there and it's banter and stuff, but is that someone just pushing boundaries? I don't know.
I think. Do you remember? Braff, do you remember earlier on in the season when Bernardo Silva tweeted Mendy and we were talking about that?
Yeah.
And obviously, within the realms of their friendship, he's felt that's obviously acceptable. And only them two can understand their friendship. But as Braff said to me there, but once that's out in the world, other people are seeing that might take offence to it. And I've seen within a non-league lad this week as well, where he's made sort of racial slurs in the past, but it's like a couple of lads, black lads that know him, have kind of jumped to his defence because they know him. So he's just supporting what you're saying there, Muzza, really, is a case of oh yeah, it's all right because he's him sort of thing. But at what point is it? And is it not okay, you know, and the context of whether it's okay in that context or it's not.
And how can it be okay for one and not another?
Yes. And I think, yeah, for avoidance of doubt, you just remove yourself from it. But, and they like you're saying with them big characters, sometimes people just don't want to talk, don't want to cause a fuss. They're not strong enough to say, well, that offended me. And it's easier to be polite, isn't it? And it's probably a British trait. We find it easy to be polite.
And also there could be a thing of, you know, actually going up against a big character in a dressing room can be quite daunting. It's quite a sort of not seen as a challenge, but fronting up to someone, especially if you're new to the side or whatever, you know, that's always going to be difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
I remember when I was at Takeley with Steve, we had a new lad up top who come with us, and Chido, we used to give him a lift, and I remember we used to have racial comments to each other all the time, and sometimes I'd push the boundaries, and he'd be like, "Oh, you'll catch me on a bad day one day, and you won't like it." And that bad day came. I remember I was at the back seat, and my mate was driving. He was at the front. I can't remember what I said to him. Called him something. When we was having one, he just turned around and he laid me one right hook. And I was at the back, and my mate was driving on the motorway on the M1. And from that day on, it never happened again. And that's what I mean, like in terms of maybe that sort of reaction. I'm not saying people need to do that, but that's the reaction that needed to happen for me to stop doing it to him and for him to stop doing that to me, because it never happened again after that.
So Neil, coming back to your comment around, or your question around what can football do? I mean, for me, football's in a position where it can really affect the, you know, it's embedded in the culture in this country and embedded in the Western world, and we need to change culture. That takes time, but football's in a position where it can affect racism in this country, because, you know, it's probably one of the most highest paid jobs. It's probably the most watched sport in the country, but yet there are so many black players and so many foreign players playing in this country, because the football in this country is some of the best that you'll get in the world. So there's a platform there to change the perspective, to start changing culture, but it starts within the system, and it has to start from the top of the system. You know, I've moved into a new career, new industry, where, you know, coming back to Brass's point, where yes, you have to earn your job, you have to earn that role. Companies now do have quotas where they have to have so many BAME people, you know, and I hate the acronym BAME, but they have to have so many BAME people in the, because again, you know, use the word BAME, you're just categorizing us as something else, you know, so, you know, but they have to have so many BAME people in their business. But yet, I mean, in my industry, there's one black CEO in the whole industry, and it's the biggest. You know, I work in finance; it's one of the biggest industries in the world. Then, if you look at the other jobs that people want, is distribution, right? Client facing. Hardly any black people are in client facing roles. So you've got that industry where there isn't a platform to do it, but football has the platform to do it, because all of the, or not all elite, but there's a lot of elite black and foreign players in football, and they've got an opportunity to do something with it if the system allows it.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? The system, and the FA have had lots of criticism across the board. But if they haven't got the stomach, if they haven't got the foresight to pick up the gauntlet and tackle the huge issue that is racism, because it's got to come obviously from them. And I'm not saying that they're racist, but they've been accused of being institutionally racist for years. But that's where it stems from, isn't it? And if it's not going to come from them, then what chance has football got if they're not going to set a precedent? What chance has it got if they're not going to deal with racism within their own leagues, and I'm talking about from the whole pyramid. And they're going to They're going to treat the pro league, the pro game, and the non-league game differently. What chance has football got of doing anything if that's how they're going to make sanctions? But then they're going to sit there and say, "Oh well, our senior men's England team got racially abused, so you over there, UEFA, you need to deal with it properly." Well, hang on a minute, sort your own back garden out first.
Yeah.
Before throwing stones.
Yeah.
It's so hypocritical.
But then chuck out horrendous fines for it, like
rather than 10,000 euros.
Yeah.
10,000 euros or whatever it is to, a national FA is nothing, is it?
Yeah.
It's a joke in itself.
Paperwork, it's a fine. Deal with it.
But to me, that just says they don't take it seriously.
No, you get a bigger fine for having a sponsor logo that's too big on your shirt. That's what they did. Well, that's what they did with the Champions League. The club had a sponsor logo that was a little bit too big. They got a bigger fine than the club got for racism. That's ridiculous. So what about non-league football, or what about Royston Town? What can we do about it? Because I think obviously things have to happen from the top, but they can still happen at smaller local levels as well, in the hope of you changing the view of, I don't know, 200 people or 10 people, a garden walk or whatever. If someone does have that viewpoint or those kind of beliefs that we've said, so what could we do at Royston? Silence.
We had that incident, didn't we, that was touched on, the incident season just gone, which was dealt with at the time, firstly by the referee, with their manager reporting it, and then the person was ejected. So it was dealt with very quickly. I didn't hear it myself, but I saw the aftermath, and
I wasn't at that game.
So, but then following that, the club, as I understand it, went through all the correct steps.
Yep.
It was resolved according to the FA, rightly or wrongly. But then there was part of that process was the club making visible, putting some signs up and things like that. Just basically saying that racism won't be accepted at the club, around the ground, etc., etc. They did a couple of other things. So, in terms of that incident, and that's all I can really comment on, is they've ticked all the boxes, for want of a better phrase. Can they do more? Always. Everybody can always do more.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Obviously, you can stick signs up, as many signs up as you want, but that can be not a hollow gesture, but as you say, it's ticking boxes. We did this, we did that. So what is, do you think there's any suggestions or, things that we can do to improve that, to improve the experience? Because, no one wants to stand there and watch a game and hear that, and I'm sure, you don't want to be playing there and hearing it, or, so, what are the other steps that perhaps as a club we could do?
I just think even this tonight, Neil, this is probably more than what most are doing. Probably doesn't feel like a box ticking exercise because no one's asked or forced you to do it.
No.
The hard thing, mate, is it don't matter what you do; it's whether people want to listen or not. You know, and I think Eddie said it earlier. It delves a lot deeper into not football, it's a society, and you've got to educate people. You've got to educate people that it's not okay to think certain ways, and that has to start at a younger age. And that's terrible. That if we're realistic, it's not going to be gone tomorrow. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be. It should exist in the first place. But it's terrible that it's not going to be gone tomorrow. But the only real way that you can do it is get into people when they're young, and it's like anything. Like if we go back, what was that program with Alf Garnett? And like that was okay on TV.
Yeah.
That was okay on TV. Like what 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, or whatever it was. And it's slowly sort of like coming away from being acceptable. It's not coming away quick enough, but it's slowly coming away from being acceptable. And you'd like to think we get to a point of where the lads haven't had to experience the things they've experienced because they're playing football, you know. But there's only so much you can try and do, because you don't know. The hard thing is a football club, and I don't know, the boys might tell me differently. You don't know who walks through your door. All you know is that they pay their money, and you know what they're like. And you people lose themselves like watching games of football. Emotions run high, and you hear them. And even whether it's racial or non-racial, you hear people saying things that they wouldn't say to somebody on the street. Even when you play against people, and all of a sudden, because someone's paid £10 to get in, it feels like you have a freedom of speech that goes above and beyond sort of social etiquette. And how do you get rid of all of them? So I think you've just got to address. We address it how we can. It's never going to be good enough in my personal opinion, Neil. Like, because you don't know. You can ask the boys to come down and like we are and do seminars and try and educate, but we can do them things, but how do you know like 3 people aren't going to turn up? Like we're doing this tonight. Like how many people are watching? Like how many people sort of actually care? Do you know what I mean? So just think it goes a lot deeper than just football. And I know I'm stating the obvious.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think, you know, we have to all try and do our bit. And, you know, if there is only a handful of people that, you know, have a think or change their ways in some way, then, you know, we are making progress, albeit slow. And, you know, and obviously, Chris, you know, you and I have kind of mentioned, and I've had a chat with Steve about how do we get, you know, more people down to Garden Walk. You know, and it's got to be that it's a welcoming place. It's you know, it's a place where you can, you know, where you can take kids, where you can, you know, because the kids are the future. They can't be going and hearing, you know, not just racist language, but, you know, foul and abusive language and homophobic language. You know, so I think, you know, we've got to try and make whatever gains in society that we can.
Yeah, I think probably talking, I don't want to give you tick box answers. You know what I mean? I don't want to tell you that like we should address it every time. We should like, yeah, you should do that anyway, sort of thing. But it's more rather than just wanting to sit and say the right things. Do you know what I mean? Like I think something like this, or at least we're having a conversation. Don't know, the boys might disagree and might have some fantastic ideas, and that may be just like a naivety that I have. But you got to get older people a lot. They're only coming to us for, and whether that's a presence in the program, Neil, I don't know. You know,
I think it's all of that and more, isn't it? Really, guys, do you have any opinions on you know, how it can be improved, or if there's, you know, what needs to be done?
I suppose just a quick comment from, you know, the couple of years that I've been at Royston, and I think that the club from top down has got a pretty, you know, low tolerance to ill discipline. You know, whether that's the players on the pitch, you know, through, you know, getting yellow cards for whatever it might be, right through to, you know, what fans are saying in the stands. So, yeah, I think the club's in a good place. Obviously, you know, every club can do more, every player can do more, every fan can do more. But I think we're in a good position to be sort of one of those that are pushing on at the front of changing things. What those things are, I don't know. But, you know, as Chris mentioned, you know, one of the first steps is just having an open conversation about it, right?
I'd like to say as well, like just to, like you say, an open conversation, but I'd like it to be like, you know, any age group as well, because, you know, there is kids out there that are, you know, are suffering with it, and they feel even afraid to talk to their parents, and, you know, that I've done it myself. And fair, like, you know, don't want to create a reaction, like, you know, from my parents, and I just want to be. I say it now, like if any kids are watching, I'm quite happy for you, you know, Twitter me, your dad Twitter me, or your mum can Twitter me, and I talk to anyone about it, just to help anyone really that's going through it, any age group, you know, man, female, I don't mind anyone. I help them out if I can.
Yeah, no, that's great.
People feel that they are on their own when, I don't know about, you know, any of you lot, but I feel like, you know, you do sometimes feel like you can be kind of isolated, I suppose, as, you know, as your different skin colour. So yeah, I just want to say that I'm, you know, if anyone does want to talk, I'm here. I'm open to talk to anybody.
Yeah, definitely. I'm more than happy to put my hand up for that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's so nice just seeing that there's a change, or there's people trying to do the right thing, and I agree with what I'll mirror what you guys said. The way it was dealt with the incident with that lad, it was so good, because we just never saw that lad again, and he was a regular. He was there at all times, and the club just dealt with it in such a right way, and it's so nice and refreshing to see for someone like myself, because as I said, you know, the country I was raised in, I'm not from here. It's so limited in opportunities and in everyday life still today. It's crazy. Like, to give you an example, an Albanian or a Bulgarian citizen in Greece will never be able to be a policeman, a fireman, a politician, ever. Still today, and it's so refreshing to see that in England, there's such movement towards doing the right thing and overcoming it. But obviously, I don't think there can never ever be enough done about it. Like Chris said, there always needs to be more.
Cool. Maybe something that we could build into the community program, Neil.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so good shout, that Dan. Yeah,
obviously they've got a lot of contact with schools and things, and that's the level that we need to get in at with the education. So yeah,
definitely. I'll mention that to Lewis, and I'm not going to like volunteer you, but I think each of you would be willing to, you know, spend a bit of time, you know, or record something that you can use in some of the sessions that they have, because I know they're doing a lot of stuff with around about, I think it's about 6 or 7 schools, local schools now. You know, and I think they're interacting. The last figures I saw, I think it's over 700 kids a week. So, you know, I think that would really help, and I think it would be a useful kind of, you know, module and program for them to push. So yeah, I'll speak to Lewis about that, definitely. Cool. All right. Well, we're getting close to the hour. I don't want to kind of take up much more of your time. Keep you away from your sofas.
How's your battery, Spyros?
Phone bill's through the roof.
Good, you said it's 10%.
Yeah. Is Jacko going to get an invoice for that? No, but I appreciate your time, guys, and you know, hopefully we can you know, move things on and make improvements. You know, hopefully large ones, but you know, the small ones that become large ones as well. So appreciate you all giving up an hour of your time tonight.
No problem.
No worries.
And also, one other thing I want to say, thank you very much on behalf of the club for the donation to the Keep the Crows Flying campaign from the first team. Much appreciated. Cheers.
Welcome.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right.
All right, mate.
Cheers.
See you later.
Cheers,
Neil.
Bye bye.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.